Kai only glanced at it, and he saw that Jiu Jianxin's side was a little bad. When he and the two women performed this secret technique before, the three visions of the sun, the moon and the stars were so bright the crescent moon and the stars lingered around the sun, and they were nourishing to each other. But now, the vision of the sun, the moon and the stars showed some signs of disintegration, and the momentum of the three is not as good as before. On the contrary, Li Minghai, as always, showed no signs of decline. It seemed that if there were no accidents, Jiu Jianxin would still lose in the end. Taking advantage of the fierce fighting between them, Yang Kai also began to move, approaching over there. It was not easy for Jiu Jianxin to do this step. Even if he couldn't severely inflict damage to Li Minghai at the last moment, it could cause some obstacles to him. No matter how bad, it can still be done to attract Li Minghai's attention. As long as Li Minghai's attention is distracted, Yang Kai can take the opportunity to shoot. Before long, Yang Kai had already gotten to a place 10 miles away from the battle circle. This is already the limit position he can approach, and if he goes further, Li Minghai will definitely notice it. Just after hiding his body, Li Minghai's shout came over, "Young leader, if you only have this ability, then the old man will send you on the road." Jiu Jianxin didn't speak, and didn't know if he didn't have the time to speak or didn't want to talk about it. The sword light he carried with the left and right sword servant suddenly skyrocketed, and in an instant it turned into a 100-foot-long sword light sternly cutting down towards Li Minghai. Li Minghai laughed loudly. "Small bugs. Do you still have to resist, young leader?" When the words fell, the soul-breaker spear in his hand shook. From the tip of the spear, a dark mysterious light was shot and met the huge sword light. The white and black rays of light collided in midair, and the ring of light spread around like ripples. In that ring of light there is a terrifying power that makes the void return stage have to retreat, showing the fierceness of this time confrontation. The two distinct rays of light remained deadlocked in the void, but soon this situation was broken. Don't know what secret technique Li Minghai used. The dark light actually skyrocketed, and directly suppressed the sword light. There was a loud bang. The sword light burst to pieces. In the muffled sound, the three shadows shot in different directions. Jiu Jianxin's face was pale, and there were signs of bleeding from the corners of his mouth, and he had obviously suffered some trauma. And his left and right sword servants were even more unbearable, as servants who cultivated with Jiu Jianxin since childhood. Left and right sword servants originally existed for Jiu Jianxin. The cultivation level is always a bit lower than Jiu Jianxin. Plus, they just shared more damage. At this moment, the sword servants on the left and right were all trembling and shaky, with a lot of blood overflowing from their mouth and nose. The clothes were dyed red. Li Minghai's eyes flickered, and he didn't take the opportunity to take the life of Jiu Jianxin. Instead, he shook his body, shaking his spear to kill the left sword servant closest to him. As a powerhouse of the Void King realm, his combat experience is naturally extremely rich. Although this is the best time to kill Jiu Jianxin's identity is after all extraordinary. He even brings the Bright Sea Dividing Domain Mirror treasure with him, so he may have other more powerful artifacts. Li Minghai did not have the confidence to kill him with a single blow. Therefore, he chose the left sword servant as his goal. As long as there is no help from the sword servant, Jiu Jianxin would not be able to use the sun, moon and star three swords secret art, and he would be able to kill Jiu Jianxin with ease. Li Minghai's actions caught his eye, and a trace of determination and anxiety surged in the beautiful eyes of the right sword servant. She hurriedly stabilized her backward stature, urged her own Saint Yuan, carried the sword light, and exhausted her strength towards the left sword servant in a hurry. And Jiu Jianxin yelled hysterically, "Ling Yu, dodge!" At the same time he shouted out these words, he also rushed toward there like the right sword servant. With three people rushing, they chased the left sword servant together, and the distance was quickly drawn closer. A sarcastic smile appeared at the corner of Li Minghai's mouth, and realizing that the time was about to come, he suddenly threw the soul-breaker spear in his hand, toward the right sword servant. Everyone was stunned. Until this time, everyone understood that Li Minghai's initial goal was not the left sword servant, but the right sword servant. Or maybe he reacted randomly and chose a better target. After the soul-breaker spear flew out of Li Minghai's control, it shook its head and waved its tail, turning into a giant python, opened its mouth, and its anger was soaring. It immediately came to the right sword servant, and wanted to swallow her. This is a Void King grade artifact in the truest sense. It is impossible for a single sword servant to do anything. If she is hit, the only ending is dead. At this moment, somewhere in Jiu Jianxin's body, the brilliance light flashed suddenly, and didn't know whether it was a secret technique or an artifact. He unexpectedly appeared in front of the right sword servant, and he held the right sword servant with one hand guarding her body, and a cyan treasure armor composed of pieces of scale armor emerges outside the body. On that treasure armor, splendid light circulated, and at first glance, it was an excellent defensive treasure. After being urged by Jiu Jianxin Saint Yuan, a layer of energy light barrier appeared outside this treasure armor, which seemed extremely strong. Just after finishing all this, Li Minghai's attack had already reached them. The giant python swayed, bombarding Jiu Jianxin's armor. The bright energy light barrier became dim at a speed visible to the naked eye. It only persisted for less than 2 breaths before bursting into pieces. The remaining power bombarded Jiu Jianxin's body. Jiu Jianxin was hit, and he fell on his back. Flying out, even the right sword servant who was guarded by him spouted a mouthful of blood. Her face was pale and bloodless. The young leader really values love and righteousness, and the old man admires it, but can you save the next one, and another one? Li Minghai's triumphant voice sounded, with a hint of sarcasm and taunting. Jiu Jianxin, who was flying backwards, fixed his eyes, and he don't know when Li Minghai will attack the left sword servant again. Suddenly he was raising one hand to shoot the left sword servant. On that palm, the Saint Yuan surged, forming a vortex visible to the naked eye. With the power of the vortex coupled with the coercion of the Void King realm powerhouse, the suppressed left sword servant could not move at all, and could not make any resistance. However, when the death aura fell, she did not worry about her safety. Instead, she looked towards Jiu Jianxin with worried beautiful eyes. Seeing that Jiu Jianxin had not been killed but suffered a heavy injury, she was relieved. With a smile, her red lips squirmed. Can't hear her voice, but Jiu Jianxin knew that she was letting him escape. Li Minghai. Jiu Jianxin roared like a wounded beast, resounding through the void. At this moment, his eyes became red. Young master, go. The right sword servant, who was held in Jiu Jianxin's arms, firmly grasped Jiu Jianxin's arm, and shouted in Jiu Jianxin's ear with a crying voice, Sisterling, you want you to go desperately. As long as you go, Sisterling, you dead will have value. Jiu Jianxin didn't move, but his hideous and distorted face showed a look of utter astonishment, and immediately burst out a light of surprise, looking behind Li Minghai. He didn't know when, but he found that a figure appeared behind Li Minghai. This person was like a ghost, who was so close to Li Minghai, and old dog Li couldn't even notice it. Immediately, the man stretched out his hand to point forward, and a series of pitch-black meniscus-like attacks suddenly formed, and hit Li Minghai. Among those attacks, there were profound and obscure power fluctuations. Even if they were far away, Jiu Jianxin could detect them. As soon as the attack came out, Li Minghai finally noticed it. While sipping food in his mouth, he hurriedly turned his head and shot a palm to the person who attacked him. Something that shocked and excited Jiu Jianxin again. Li Minghai's palm failed to disperse all those attacks, and some crescent-like attacks still struck Li Minghai's arm. Old dog Li's arm disappeared slightly strangely, as if never existed, and as if swallowed by the void. There was severe pain, and Li Minghai screamed frantically. His other intact hand stretched out his hand, and the soul-breaker spear flew back. He looked at the young man who attacked him with fiery eyes and said savagely, "Kid, you will pay the price. You don't have this chance." The young man snorted coldly, flipping his wrist, and a long sword with no edge and no blade appeared. The long sword trembled and twisted slightly, transforming into the image of a green dragon, and pounced toward Li Minghai. The dragon roared, and dragon prestiges diffused. Li Minghai called out, and quickly activated the power of the Soulbreaker Spear, turning into a giant python to meet the enemy again. Two monsters transformed by secret treasures collided in the void, but how could a giant python beat a dragon? Only persisted for a while, and was destroyed by the dragon. Li Minghai finally showed a look of horror in his eyes. He wanted to look for the trace of the young man who attacked him, but he was surprised to find that he had not found it. Just as he appeared, after offering the secret treasure, he disappeared like a ghost again. A ray of murderous intent struck from behind. Li Minghai's heart burst, and he quickly released his domain in an attempt to restore the disadvantage. Although it was only a moment of confrontation with the young man who attacked him, he keenly noticed that the opponent only had the cultivation level of third-order Void Return stage. To deal with the Void Return stage, Domain Field was undoubtedly the best support. But not every one of them is like Xianxia, possessing an extraordinary treasure that restrains the domain like the bright sea dividing domain mirror. Li Minghai made a good calculation, but what surprised him again was that when his own domain field filled out, another Xi potential field started take shape. Not only was it not suppressed by his own domain, but on the contrary, it was comparable to his own domain. In that Xi potential field contains a mysterious power. The surrounding space began to collapse, and a series of space cracks like gossamer filled Li Minghai's surroundings, enveloping him in airtight Space Force. Li Minghai exclaimed. At this moment, the green dragon that destroyed the giant python rushed in front of him, opening its mouth and biting toward Li Minghai. Behind him, the chill is pressing, and murderous intent is like a tide that envelops Li Minghai. He was actually distressed and desperate. To be continued.